Well, maybe we should get started because it's 6:37, and hope more people show up. But I want to start off with some bad news. Steve Sosby from Heal Palestine, our scheduled speaker, had to cancel, and I should say, hopefully it's postponed. But he had to cancel at the last second, so he's not going to be here tonight. Um, and I know, the main topic of the meeting was the genocide in Palestine. So I made a call to Don Bryant, who has been working on this with Cleveland Peace Action. Um, Don is going to try to join us between 6:45 and 7. He's actually on another meeting and tell us what he knows. And then we are going to try to reschedule Steve Sosby and Heal Palestine for the summer. Unfortunately, our May meeting is already booked. Summertime will be nice because we're going to be outdoors. I'm not sure if this is going to be the order, but we'll be back in Cleveland Heights for one meeting. We'll be back at Edgewater for one meeting, and we'll be in a park in Lakewood for another meeting. So outdoors, are coming up as we get to nicer weather. Just a note on, where we are organizationally and what our priorities are right now. Obviously, promote anything and everything that can help the situation in Palestine, whether it's protest events, where you can donate, informational sessions. I think that every progressive organization should have that as one of their priorities, because what's going on there is horrible. And we, of course, are joining with all of the other organizations in calling for a ceasefire in Palestine. But hopefully when Don gets here, we can have a little bit more on that, and then, hopefully get Steve Sosby in for a summer meeting. But one of the other things that we're watching very closely is the Browns stadium renovations, which now appear to be a new Browns stadium in Brook Park. And if you've been seeing our Sunday emails and what we've been putting in all of our communications, it's an ask for you to contact your county council person and simply say, we are opposed to, or I am opposed to public sector dollars being spent for the Browns to have a nice new dome stadium. And that appears to be what it's going to be whenever they finally release it. You've seen the newspaper articles on this, but we do know that the Browns have had, well, we know they've had conversations with Mayor Bibb. But what's interesting about what's going on in the city of Cleveland is at the last city council meeting, they had to pay the consultant firm that's developing lakefront development plans a little bit more money because they're now drawing up plans without the Brown Stadium there. And you can imagine the plans would be completely different. And to be honest, lakefront development would be enhanced if the Brown Stadium wasn't there. But it says a lot that they're now drawing up plans without the Brown Stadium. We do know that the Browns have met with County Executive Chris Ronayne, and we also know that the Browns have met with the mayor of Brook Park. So if it is indeed going to be Brook Park, the likely scenario is City of Cleveland's out of it, and most likely City of Cleveland tax dollars. They're not going to give money to build a new stadium in Brook Park. So it would likely be what the Haslams are going to put in and what the county is going to put in. Why else are the Browns meeting with Chris Ronayne? And an interesting tidbit, and I don't know if you've caught this, but we've put this out there in CCPC recommended a couple of times. The sales tax, the county passed right before the holidays. And they did this real quick. People aren't paying attention a few days before Christmas. Um, but it was a 40-year extension on a sales tax that was already in place. That sales tax over a 40-year period is expected to yield about $4 billion. And you can see like, oh, well, okay, it's going to pay for the new jail. That's about 750 million, but it could also finance bonds in the billions if the county were to go in with the Haslams on this dome stadium in Brook Park. So, our ask to you is to make that call to your county council person and simply say that, we're opposed to public sector dollars being put for the Brown Stadium. Now, we're assuming you're opposed, but we have data to back this up. Deb, what was it? About 93% of our membership said public sector dollars shouldn't be used in our survey.
I think it was pretty close to that. I can actually look that up if you like while you're talking.
All right. Well, you guys interested in hearing the number? We actually had several hundred people take that survey, and it was like overwhelming. So it's not like we're assuming the position of our membership. We have data to back it up. So now, while we're waiting for Don, two topics, and this is actually good that it appears we're going to be a smaller group tonight because we can, have some informal conversations. One, do any of you guys have suggestions or a suggestion as to future speakers for our meetings?
I'm going to let everybody unmute themselves, Steve.
Yes, we're small enough to do that.
You should be able to unmute yourself. Don't all talk at once.
I feel like I'm back teaching again and it's first period when all the kids are sleeping. But that's okay. So, all right. Another topic we're looking for input on is should CCPC do judicial endorsements? And the way our endorsement process works now, you guys know that all of our endorsements are a vote of our membership. But we actually have a screening committee that determines two things about a candidate before we put a vote up for an endorsement. One is competence, and the other is generally progressive ideas. Now, we don't have a litmus test on that. I mean, we've put candidates forward to a vote of our membership, who maybe don't meet all of the criteria in our website, but they're generally progressive, maybe more progressive on some issues than others. But then we ultimately let the membership have their say. On the competence issue, one of the things our screening committee does is ask for example, if it's a candidate for General Assembly, we ask questions on issues that are before the General Assembly. And sometimes we get first-time candidates who are seeking all of the endorsements, and they know nothing about what's going on at the State House, which is not good. Okay. And it's also not something that if we put that candidate to a vote of our membership, that you would be able to discern, okay, from the questionnaire. So, we've had candidates that we've interviewed that we did not put up to a vote of our membership for that reason. Either they have no knowledge of the issues, or they're not progressive and not generally progressive on the issues. Now, judicial endorsements. A number of us are not necessarily in this room, but a number of Progressive Caucus members are city leaders and ward leaders in Cleveland. And we see and hear from all of the judicial candidates. And we do that because they are all seeking the endorsement of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. But I know, most of them, when they contact me, I'm city leader in the community I live in Middleburg Heights. They will ask me, does the Progressive Caucus endorse judicial candidates? And they would really like to have that endorsement, because our endorsement is kind of, I don't want to be presumptuous in this, but it's kind of like a seal of approval from the progressive community. And so, and this is the same, with our legislative candidates. Candidates seek the endorsement so they can put endorsed by the Cuyahoga County and, kind of have that seal of approval. The problem with judicial candidates, and one of the things that we, just to step back, one of the things that we do with the legislative candidates is we do a general social media screening, Facebook, that type of thing. And if it's an incumbent, their position, how they have voted in the past, that type of thing. And again, we don't have like a litmus test on this, but we kind of just do a screening. But with judicial candidates, they are not permitted to tell anybody how they would rule on a specific case. So that would make the screening a little bit tougher. On the other hand, we get our members all the time, right before elections, ask us which judicial candidates have we endorsed. And then my response is, well, we don't do judicial endorsements, okay? And sometimes, say, but we kind of like this person, and this person. And there's certain things like if a judicial candidate has been a public defender, okay, they're going to see things differently than the majority of judicial candidates come from the prosecutor's office. And what we've heard is Mike O'Malley approves or disapproves of them running, and approves or disapproves of who they're running against. Okay, but prosecutor, public defender, we're progressives, you see, so we kind of tend towards the public defender. So my question to you guys is, what would you think about us doing judicial endorsements?
Go ahead, Tristan.
Yeah, Tristan, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry, I haven't been to a lot of these meetings. In fact, the Lyco Democratic Club's meeting right now, I got to get over there in a minute. But, I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I'll keep it super brief. I think, I do think that judge candidates can say more than they do, and they hide behind that a little bit. The fact that they can't talk about specific cases. And I think a good case in point for that is Jen O'Donnell. She was pretty progressive and unabashedly progressive and talked about bail bond reform and kind of how we got a really good sense about how she would rule. And I think she got a lot of our support, though I don't think we were doing endorsements around that time. Maybe we did, I don't remember. But I think that maybe, just throwing it out there, we could push judicial candidates more to not let them stop at, oh no, I can't talk about that because I'm a judge, I have to be impartial. No, you can and you should. This is, we can push. And that's what this organization really was at least founded about, was trying to push candidates towards, push more progressive candidates and for them to really stand on their issues. Secondly, I think that if we're going to endorse ever in this, it should be sparingly and only for those candidates like, I think, Jen O'Donnell, who were willing to go out on that limb, because it does open them up to not getting the money from the prosecutors and getting the money from the different law firms and things that represent businesses and things like that, when they do kind of show their cards and they are a little bit more progressive. So when we do endorse those, a couple of candidates, we've got to also throw down and back them up where we can. Just my 2 cents. Take it for what you want.
Tristan, thank you for the input. and Tristan is well aware of what we were at the beginning, because I don't know if all of you know this, but Tristan is a co-founder of the Progressive Caucus. Would your suggestion be now, because you've seen our interview committee, you know how that works, that push come from that committee or a forum in front of our membership?
I think you can structure it however you want. I appreciate that. Even for me, you push me when I would apply for endorsements, and you'd ask me very pointed, specific questions, and even go places where I didn't know the answers to things. And I think, yeah, being that direct is really important. So certainly there, but also wherever. Again, I'm encouraging folks to apply, but being very sparing in who you decide to move forward. I think that's okay. That's my 2 cents.
Well, I
Well,
will tell.
go ahead, Deb.
I was just going to say, I will tell you, this last judicial race, the races for the primary, taught me a really good lesson that I personally need to start doing a deep dive on these candidates, because we found out that one of them, who shall remain nameless, works for an anti-union law firm. And then he hid it, and then would never even, he actually works for Kelfie Halter, which is one of the well-known anti-union law firms. But then the bad thing is he hid it after he knew that there were some of us out there doing the research. But unfortunately for him, what he doesn't understand, there's something called the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine. So I got all the evidence. And so now I even have evidence that he took it off the site to try to hide who he really is. So I think that that's one thing that I've learned my lesson, and that maybe more of us need to do, is to really do a deep dive on these candidates, because you don't know who they are. Yes, a lot of them do come from the prosecutor's office, but then there are others that do not. Actually, and Anne had her hand up, and then Bob.
Yeah, I just want to say that this last election, like I do every year, every time we, vote on this, I go to judge for yourself, but I've become more aware that it's what the lawyers, who the lawyers vote for. And I did choose somebody based on their endorsements. So I think it'd be a good thing. I know it's not easy to figure out who to endorse. It's a tricky thing to do, but it would help. I think it would help people to make a better choice.
Bob?
Yeah, I don't really have a strong opinion. I have a couple of things that if you start endorsing a few, it's going to be hard to say, well, here are the ones that are important to endorse, and maybe these other ones, it's hard to make a decision. But I want to ask, how do other organizations decide? Like, I know the AFL-CIO, they make judicial endorsements. They must have some criterion that they use, and I imagine there's other groups. So have you looked into that?
No, and we will before we decide whether or not to do it, Bob. But we thought, well, the other thing is I needed filler tonight because the speaker canceled. but we thought we'd ask you guys first. So.
Well, this is something I happen to have a little bit of experience with, so I'm glad I showed up today. These endorsement processes and every single day at this point. But Bob, I think that's a great question. And I think places like AFL-CIO, there's other places too, like Moms Demand Action. I kind of like how they do things. You don't get endorsed, but you're going to be the gun sense candidate. And there may be several gun sense candidates in the same race. So they don't endorse you, and they get a limited sort of, you can use that gun sense logo. There's certain things you can and can't do. You can't say they endorse you. But maybe there's an issue we care about. Maybe bail bond reform, maybe some other criminal justice related issue we're working on that year that we can get the judges to be on record about. And then if they're willing to endorse a certain position on it, they would be the Progressive Caucus candidate, or Progressive Caucus, they pass some level of like the bail bond reform sense candidate, or the bail bond reform candidate by the Progressive Caucus. And that way you get everybody to sign on, essentially, and they can use that logo and they can sort of flaunt that they're more progressive, I guess. That's another way to do it. if you want to do multiple folks in one race or multiple folks across the board. And we don't even know who they're running against until the very last second sometimes, which can be rough.
That's true, and that's a very good point, because they'll shift races, and they will contact us a year out, and we won't know what race they're running in until maybe a couple weeks before the filing deadline, sometimes a couple of days before the filing deadline. So no, that's a good point, Tristan. Any other thoughts on this?
Bob has his hand raised again.
You know, one thing you could do is, I think it's like the Bar Association does, and you could have without endorsing a specific candidate, you can give them like a approval, and possibly you're not making a comment about whether you're better than somebody else, but you're just saying, well, we know about this person and we give them a approval. And possibly even you could give two people approval in the same race if it turns out that way, without having to just say we are specifically endorsing this one candidate.
Bob, let me ask you this. If we went in that direction, would that be the call of the screening committee or a vote of our membership? And it's okay if you don't know, because we don't know
Yeah,
either.
I really haven't thought about it. It just kind of came to mind while we were talking. So,
Okay. Any other thoughts on judicial endorsements? All right, Don Bryan
Well,
has
since I just joined, and and for some reason I was very confused, because I was here for Heal Palestine, but with judicial endorsements, I vehemently oppose, as you know, CCPC getting involved in this at all. I don't think there's a good way to do it. I think it would take a huge amount of bandwidth that we have, and I think we'd be getting into really murky waters that don't actually move the needle at all in a progressive direction, and we just be getting slightly better technocrats and whatever. And I think that I'll continue advocating as long as I draw breath for us not to get involved in this at all.
Well, Eric, your passion on the topic is appreciated, as is your input. No, here's what happened. To those of you that joined us late, Steve Sosby, the director of Heal Palestine, had to cancel at the last second. And we hope it's postponed. We're going to try to get him to one of our summer meetings. And so, Don Bryan is here from Cleveland Peace Action to kind of give us some guidance as to what's going on in the greater Cleveland area as far as resistance to the genocide in Palestine. And Don was nice enough. I called him like a little bit after 6 and asked him to come on and do this. But that's what happened, Eric. Steve canceled at the last second. So, and we kind of had to have a little bit of filler until Don came on, if that makes sense. So Don, welcome. Thank you very much for pinch hitting here at the last second. And I know when I called you, you were on a call for May Day, a May Day event. Tell us a little bit about that too.
And it's all connected. Thank you, Steve. I just saw Eric on that meeting too. So that's our May Day planning, which we do every year. And typically that's May Day is a labor and workers' rights and immigrant rights, celebration and action. But this year we're focusing on the Gaza genocide, and that's what the meeting was just about. And I can start with that by saying that the plan for May Day is a action at the Key Bank on Public Square, demanding divestiture of Israel bonds. So that's what the action will be. Divest. There'll be speakers from the Palestinian community and from labor. Well, our normal groups that organize for May Day, such as the Workers' World Party, CPUSA, Communist Party, Cleveland Club, Jewish Voice for Peace joined us today. The Palestinian Youth Movement joined us today on this meeting. The Northeast Ohio Workers Center has been organizing with us and will be speaking, and the Red Triangle movement and CPC Progressive Caucus. You want to join in? You're welcome to join us. So sorry if we didn't get you involved in a little sooner with the organizing.
Well, Don, send me the info for the next planning meeting.
Well, May Day's coming right up, so
Oh, that's right. It's
we're
next
gonna
week.
show
I
up.
forgot.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little. Would you like to be involved?
Sure.
Yes.
I mean, we could co-host,
Absolutely. I'll send you the flyer. I'll put you in the Signal chat group. You on Signal, Steve? You have Signal?
no,
No, he doesn't, Don.
Well, I'll still send you the flyer. And if anybody from this group wants to be the liaison for CCPC on Signal, I can add that person, whoever you are. Eric, are you already on it?
yeah, Eric, Eric, you can.
Yeah, I can join. I'm kind of like, I'm trying to avoid having another thing because I just joined a bunch of stuff for ESAs. The only reason, but I'm not adverse to it necessarily. If there needs to be someone to communicate back and forth, I didn't. Can I ask someone on like the WhatsApp group or something for that?
It's on Signal. It's on Signal.
Oh, but I'm saying,
Don, just go ahead and put me in, Don.
All right.
or not good. No, I was just saying, someone on WhatsApp can give me the link for the Signal. But yeah, but if Deb wants to do it, yeah, I'm sort of trying to avoid it. But.
Gotcha. And Deb has always been part of our May Day planning too, but I don't know, we didn't hook up this year.
So Don, I've been reading a lot about, Students for Justice in Palestine, the CASE group. Have you guys connected with them? I believe they might be willing to provide bodies.
Yeah. Yes, we have.
Good.
But Steve, I can start my presentation out by saying this. I know Steve Sosaby from Kent, Ohio, of course, but also when he started the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, he's a co-founder with his past wife, who's deceased, Huda. But I met them again in Gaza when we took a delegation to Gaza in 2009 after Operation Cast Lead, which was the incursion by Israel that started right after George Bush got out of office and ended right before Obama got in office. So it was 20 some days between the two presidents. No one was at the helm in the US, and Israel went at it. And that's when they killed 1,400 people, mostly civilians. And that was considered a lot of people. I mean, it always is, right? I mean, one person, one death. But now we've seen up to almost, over 35,000 killed, I believe is the numbers now, and 12,000 children. The figures are 70% women and children of those dead, martyred, many buried under the rubble, and those numbers aren't really counted in that count. And I did get to hear Steve Sosaby speak at John Carroll just the other night. There was a Students for Justice in Palestine event, and Heal Palestine was the headline speaker, but they had a meal and a fashion show. So Palestinian dresses and men in cultural dress as well. So that was a combined event. It's such a sad story when, we're talking about bringing children out of, well, it's wonderful to bring the children out of a war zone, but I know that one of the co-directors there spoke, actually Steve's newer wife, and she's newest wife, his wife, sorry. She's a doctor with the group as well. And she was talking about bringing children out, but then the children's families are left in the war zone. And that's very difficult, as you know. So, but they're getting it done, and it's a good fundraiser to support. So currently, and I'll just give a brief overview of Cleveland activities. after October 7th, the Palestinian community started a organizing with the coalitions, Interreligious Task Force, Cleveland Peace Action, Al-Auda, that's the Right to Return movement, the Palestinian Youth Movement, and there's advocates, there's, liaisons here in Cleveland. The SJPs, Students for Justice in Palestine organizations. And the organizing has been massive. As you've seen, the marches have been massive. We've seen thousands of people in the streets. We've seen shutdowns of traffic. We've seen banner drops. We've seen lots of activities. We've seen disruptions at city meetings and at senators and Congress people's chats, coffees they're having with their constituency. We're asking the right questions. Sometimes a disruption will occur. So when genocide is happening, disruptions are going to happen, and it's all civil disobedience, and people will accept the consequences of their actions. So if there's going to be arrests, that people are well aware. Steve asked about, I was going to talk about city council real quick. Why in the world would we ask city council to pass a ceasefire resolution? They're not funding Israel. Well, that's true. However, Justin Bibb, right out the gate back in October, said, we support Israel in this action, this incursion, after Hamas did the attack on October 7th. They jumped on the bandwagon for Israel, and so did Blaine Griffith and other council members. And then, so if you're going to be making these public statements, then you got to stand the repercussions. And that's when the people went to city council to ask for a ceasefire resolution. And that lasted, 17 weeks. And there were disruptions, and there was some noise. And there was no violence. There was no violence. And democracy can be a very noisy experience, right? Go to Britain. You should hear the House of Commons, as we know, right? We're a little quieter here in the US, I guess, but democracy is noisy, and it's all nonviolent. So those disruptions, hey, that's the way it goes in a genocide. I'm sorry to tell you. But so now we got a ceasefire resolution. The mayor didn't sign it, as you know. However, now the focus is on Cuyahoga County Council, who has invested, has a $19 million portfolio of Israel bonds, and Israel bonds are sold around the country. The state of Ohio has over $200 million invested in those bonds, and those bonds are a gamble because the Israeli economy is on a free fall, and it depends on their viability as a nation to be able to re-up and on bonds. I'm not a bond guy, so maybe you all can explain a little more, but I do know that they're a very risky bond and they're not guaranteed. So we've been asking Cuyahoga County to divest of those bonds since 2006, actually. And I worked with CARE Ohio, Council on American Islamic Relations, way back then, and other organizations. We testified against it, but in any case, they kept buying the bonds. In fact, in 2006, the county treasurer agreed. I forgot his name. You might remember. He agreed. We met with him, and he agreed not to buy anymore. But guess what? Then he was out as treasurer, and they got a new treasurer, and they bought him. So, and funny enough, not funny, seriously, there was a bunch of people that testified 2 weeks ago at the county council meeting, and the recent meeting was just this past Tuesday, so there was more testimony. But 2 weeks ago, the testimony was, don't reinvest that $3 million that was invested in Israel bonds and just got paid back or whatever. It's back in the kitty again, able to be reinvested. And meanwhile, in those last 2 weeks, guess what? That $3 million was reinvested in Israel bonds. Israel bonds support the occupation of Palestine, and it's an illegal occupation. So, of course, why would you invest in an entity that is taking, having illegal settlements and having an illegal occupation? I'm not saying that the bonds supply any bullets. I don't know that they do. I don't think they do, but Israel bonds help support the economy of the occupation. So that's a fair enough reason for me to say that Cuyahoga County should not be investing. So that's that. Oh, as far as Case Western, Steve asked about that die-in that occurred a few weeks ago. Maybe it was last week. And they do need some support. I need to I've asked some people in our committee, Cleveland Peace Action, to follow up on that. We have a young Palestinian American to find out a little bit more, board member now, Amina Hamdan, to find out a little bit more about what's going on with that. I don't know if there's been suspensions, and maybe you know, Steve, maybe other people know. I feel like there was student suspensions there, and they definitely need to be backed up. And I just don't have enough information to really give a good report on the.
Well, Don, I actually met with a group of case students that were in the organization a few weeks ago, and what they've done is they have suspended their charter to be a campus organization for allegedly posting flyers in the wrong places for their events. And the Students for Justice, they claim they didn't do it. So, that could very well be a setup, but it also seems like a frivolous reason to suspend the group's charter.
Yeah, now that I'd heard about as well, and I know that Council on American Islamic Relations, Cleveland office is working on that legal case for them, with them. So I think that's not the issue now. Now the die-in is the issue, I guess. So I'm sorry, Steve, I don't have a whole lot I don't have a whole lot of information on what happened with the die-in. I think the other issue that you talked about right now is with the posters. I think that's already been resolved. We need to find that out for sure, but the die-in issue is a current issue, and they are being punished for that.
Don, I just looked it up. They haven't been reinstated. There's an article dated yesterday. So they
So
haven't
they have been
reinstated.
suspended. You're saying they were suspended?
Yes, and it says it's over the flyers.
Oh, over the flyers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Says they were glued flyers around campus.
Okay. Yeah, sorry I didn't have the information. Thanks, Deb.
Yep, no problem.
Yeah, I think the die-in. For those of you that don't know, the case students for justice in Palestine, parents with their prospective students are visiting the campus to see if they want to come to case, and they had about 80 students do a die-in right on the square where all of the prospective students were. Good political theater. But I think that to a number of those prospective students, it's like, oh, this is where I want to go. These people are cool. Yeah, that cases of being upset at them. And Don, let me get your thoughts too. What's going on at Columbia University and around the country, but Columbia is kind of a flashpoint because it's New York City. And it's also, for those of you that don't know, it was the epicenter of the initial protests during the Vietnam War. But it seems like college administrations are handling this in exactly the wrong way. But by handling it in the wrong way, it's getting more publicity for the issue.
That's right.
If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Yeah, well, it's a welcome sign to see the colleges taking action against this genocide, and it's caught on like wildfire, hasn't it? There's a list of maybe 10 to 12 universities now that I've seen that are doing protests and encampments. In Ohio State is trying to set one up today at 5 o'clock, I guess, but they got shut down earlier today, and they're going to try to start one up again, from what I saw. I don't know how that went. Hey, I don't know. It's just a good sign, Steve.
I think so too. Guys, do you have any questions for Don or any comments?
Well, I just had a couple on, some of the student encampments and stuff, because obviously I've super been following. It's kind of interesting you bring up the history of Colombia, first of all, in that they were infamous for their brutal repression of the student speech in 1968. And there's even plaques there saying it hurt their reputation. And there's all this, stuff even in their what legal documents, charter and everything, saying they can never do anything like that again. But it's interesting, like I read on this Democracy Now! Thing, Juan Gonzalez, who was part of the 1968 protest, was, talking to some of the new with it. One thing that's different, it's weird. So in those times, they actually occupied buildings and it interfered with the operation of the colleges. Like they actually literally shut it down. It's amazing that the colleges are going to these lengths purely for these like peaceful encampments, which are at most maybe like a minor annoyance for some people. And then, but where they did have, I don't know if anyone followed that one UCal Poly Humboldt College, where they did occupy a building. And, it's harder to get dislodged from a building than if you're just out on a lawn. And they actually have thus far been able to hold on. They've brought in police to try to get them out of there, and they're still there. So I don't know. It just interesting stuff. That's
all. Bob has his hand up, Steve.
Don, I wonder if you could explain something. There's all kinds of different groups in the Cleveland area. I see different rallies here and there. I'm wondering to what extent the groups are cooperative. And also, I'm wondering, what are people actually calling for? Is there anything in addition to a ceasefire? In other words, like sometimes I hear the slogan, when there is genocide, resistance is justified, or something like that. Now, does that mean that they're saying any kind of resistance to Israel, including the actual, October 7th attack, is being supported? Do people support Hamas? Or certain groups some people doing one and some people doing the other. So I really, on the things I've gone to, I really don't have a clear idea of what I'm supporting, to be honest. I mean, I know I'm supporting the ending the the fighting and stuff, but beyond that, I don't know if there's particular programs that are being that the groups are proposing.
Thank you, Bob. So some of the demands are ceasefire is one, but stopping the arms that U.S. sends to Israel is major. And we just sent another 14 billion yesterday, or voted for that yesterday. They signed it. Biden signed that. So and the other one would be refund UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee Relief and Works Agency. Those are three of the demands that I've seen. That
okay, but in general, they're not specifically supporting any particular Palestinian group or program or anything like that.
So all nonviolent, violence is not supported by any of the groups here. As far as Hamas, some people might support them personally, but that is not there's no public endorsement for Hamas in any of the groups that I'm aware of, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
And I going back to the colleges, I heard today on Democracy Now!, the universities and whatnot, their encampments and all that, they're trying to say that it was anti-Semitic and that Jewish students are afraid to attend their classes. And this is ridiculous, because it is not anti-Semitic. There's Jewish people at the events. As you know, Jewish Voice for Peace is one. If Not Now is another Jewish organization that has been joining the protests around the country. Disruptions, closing down traffic, closing down Grand Central Station. They did a sit-in in DC a few months back, and these are Jewish organizations. So there's no reason to say that was somebody in Congress that said that. That was the speaker. What's his name? The speaker of the House was saying that Jewish students
Johnson.
are afraid to attend classes. And that's a bunch of bullshit. They're the ones that are starting any kind of, any animosity. They're trying to build animosity. Sounds like to me. Bob, I don't know if I answered all of your questions. The demands and the endorsements. The work groups are generally working together. I mean, there's some personal issues with some, always as happens, they get along like white people. What can I tell you? So I'm gonna have to leave in a few minutes. We got a follow-up meeting from our Dr. King speech reading with the high school students in Cleveland we did last week. So I'm gonna do a
All right, well, I got two quick follow-ups, Don, and hopefully you have time to answer both. First is a two-state solution, one of the demands. And the second is, I read an article that a massive protest is being planned in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention, which, for those of you that know the history, echoes of 1968, right? Do you know anything about that?
I've heard talk of this Democratic National Convention. Actually, on a meeting last night, I heard that there's folks planning on that. I don't know too much about it yet. But the first question, I have a whole lot of information for you. So, one state option is one democratic state is what's being called for by all the Palestinian Americans that I know and in Cleveland. This is also called for in the United Nations back in 1948, when Israel was created by one UN resolution. Resolution 194 called for the right to return for the refugees back into what is now Israel, for the Palestinians that still have their keys for their homes that were stolen. So they have the right of return, and the UN acknowledged this, but it's never been honored. So if we would apply justice, is what I told Sherrod Brown's office manager a few weeks ago, you wouldn't need the bombs. So, one democratic state is what's being called for. Okay, hey, that doesn't look very likely right now, right? A bunch of Palestinians going back and living with the Israelis. But there's such a thing as reparations, right? So the negotiations should start at the point of, okay, we're sorry we stole your land. Now we're going to, whatever. I mean, I don't know how the negotiations will go, but that's where it's got to start. Two-state, they've been talking two-state for years, Steve, you know that, decades. And it's just an excuse to keep putting on to prolong the occupation, from what I can see. If the Palestinians want a two-state, they would have to give up their right to return. That's up to them.
I do know that. I just thought I'd ask.
Of course.
Any other questions for Don before he hops off? Thank you very much, Don, for filling in.
Oh, thank you.
And
You're
so
welcome. Take care, all.
we'll talk soon. And thank you guys for staying tonight, even knowing that our featured speaker wasn't going to be here. And we'll keep you in tune, if we get Steve rescheduled, hopefully when we get Steve rescheduled. Our May meeting is the last meeting by Zoom until we get to the outdoor summer meetings. And we've got somebody from the drag resistors. And we also have Kathy Caraway from SPAN Ohio, which is the Single Payer Action Network, single payer healthcare being, one of our strong platforms. And Deb, the date is May 22nd, correct?
I do believe, and it's the drag defenders. You can
Drag
check out.
They say
check-
resistance. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
you can check out dragdefenders.org.
I was thinking of the resistance,
I know. It's May 22nd.
May 22nd. Again, thanks for coming tonight, folks. Take care.